Good morning. Thanks for joining us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica's quarterly press briefing. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy for the July to September period. Dr. Henry is supported by Mr. James Stewart, Senior Director, Economic Planning, Research and Logistics Division. As Gwyneth said earlier, at the end of the presentation, we will take your questions. Over to you, Dr. Henry.
All right, thank you, Marcio. Good morning, everyone. Before I provide the details on economic performance, let me take this opportunity to remind you of the purpose of these quarterly estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed. This is based on the latest available information from major data providers. This release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with protocols in all modern economies globally, where it is a common practice to release a first, second, and even a third preliminary estimate before the final official figures are released. In the case of Jamaica, the PIOJ releases the preliminary growth estimate within the first 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, and Statin releases the official GDP figures at the end of the 3rd month following the quarter being reviewed. The release of preliminary outturn information is used by various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, for whom the magnitude and direction of sectoral performance is critical to inform planning and policy-related decisions. I would like to reiterate that trends have shown that the gap between our initial estimate and the subsequent estimate produced by Statin is usually larger in times of extraordinary shocks, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic. That is, the variation between PIOJ's estimate and Statin's subsequent estimate is likely to be outside the usual band, both at the industry level as well as the overall growth outturn. Today, we are reporting an estimated real value added growth of 6.3% for the July to September 2021 quarter, relative to the corresponding quarter of 2020. The estimated outturn for the review quarter largely reflected the impact of 1, the relaxation of COVID-19 containment measures globally, which facilitated increased domestic and external demand, resulting in a general uptick in economic activities. 2, increased operating hours for businesses, which facilitated higher capacity utilization rates and production levels. 3, higher levels of employment as firms either resumed or ramped up operations. And 4, increased business confidence associated with the prospects for strengthened economic outturn in the short to medium term. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry is estimated to have increased by 2.8% due to an improved performance in 3 of the 4 industries, namely agriculture, manufacturing, and construction. Agriculture. Real value added for the agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry was estimated to have grown by 7.2%. This improvement reflected the impact of increased demand, particularly from the tourism sector, which grew consequent on the relaxation of previously implemented COVID-19 measures. Also, positively impacting the industry was a continuation of the productivity incentive program, which provided fertilizer and seedlings that assisted farmers to rebound following tropical storms Elsa and Grace. Growth was also facilitated by a 6.5% increase in hectares of domestic crops reaped. Performance was driven by higher output in all subcomponents of the industry. Other agricultural crops was estimated to have grown by 5.5%, reflecting higher production in 6 of the 9 crop groups. The most significant increases were recorded for potatoes up 20.8%, yams up 17.3%, legumes up 17.2%, and vegetables up 4.5%. Output of traditional export crops increased by 9.5%, largely reflecting growth in the production of banana, up 4.4%, coffee, up 50.9%, and cocoa, which increased from 13 tons to 81 tons. Animal farming is estimated to have increased by 13.9% due to higher broiler meat production, up 20.4%, and egg production, up 2.8% to 55.4 million eggs. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry decreased by 31% due to declines in both alumina and crude bauxite production. Alumina production decreased by 34.8%, largely due to lower production from the Jamalco refinery, which was impacted by a fire at the powerhouse, resulting in a cessation of operations during the quarter. The refinery is expected to reopen in 2022. The capacity utilization rate at alumina refineries decreased to 29.3%, down 15.6 percentage points. Crude bauxite production fell by 8%, reflecting the impact of lower demand from overseas purchasers. Consequently, the bauxite capacity utilization rate decreased to 47.7%, down 4.2 percentage points. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing industry grew by an estimated 8.5% due to increased output in the food, beverages, and tobacco and the other manufacturing sub-industries. The growth in the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry reflected higher production for edible fats, up 28.6%, edible oils, up 15.6%, poultry meat, up 21.9%, and animal feed, up 12.8%. These increases were sufficient to outweigh declines in the production of rum and alcohol, down 11.1%, and dairy products, down 25%. Other manufacturing grew, reflecting higher production in the petroleum products and the chemicals and chemical products component. All petroleum products surveyed, with the exception of liquid petroleum gas, LPG, grew, including gasoline, up 34.8%, automotive diesel oil, ADO, up 55.1%, fuel oil, up 37.8%, and turbo fuel, up 73.1%. For chemicals and chemical products, increases were recorded for aluminum sulfate, up 59.8%, and salt, up 65.8%. Further growth in the other manufacturing sub-industry was tempered by lower cement and clinker production by 28% and 23.3% respectively. Construction. Real value added for the construction industry increased by 1.7%, mainly spurred by growth in the other construction and building construction component. This performance was reflected in a 5.6% real increase in the sales of construction-related inputs. Growth in the other construction component was due to an increase in capital expenditure on civil engineering activities, reflecting the National Works Agency, which disbursed $9.1 billion relative to $5.1 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2020. Disbursement was largely for work on the Yallas to Harborview leg of the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP. NROC, which disbursed $2.2 billion relative to $1.3 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2020. Expenditure facilitated works on the SCHIP Part A, that is the Maypen in Clarendon to Williams Field in Manchester component. The estimated growth in the building construction component was driven mainly by the performance of the non-residential category, reflecting hotel construction and renovation activities, as well as the build-out of commercial office space. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have grown by 7.3% relative to the corresponding quarter of the previous year, reflecting higher real value added for all industries. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry is estimated to have recorded growth in real value added of 0.6%, reflecting higher electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption grew by 0.2% due to higher consumption in 2 of the 6 categories. Higher sales were recorded for largest power, that's rate 70, up 27.5%. Power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kilovolt ampere, but less than 500 kilovolt ampere, up 0.1%. Declines were, however, recorded for residential, down 2.2%, general service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kVA, down 4.2%, and large power, that's businesses using more than 500 kVA, down 0.2%, and street lighting plus other was down 3%. The decline in sales to the residential category may be attributed to an increase in the number of persons who have resumed work activities outside the home. 9 of the 14 parishes recorded increased electricity sales, led by Trelawney, up 23.9%, Westmoreland, up 14.9%, and Hanover, up 14.9%. These increases may be attributed to higher tourism-related activities. Water consumption grew by 2%, reflecting increases in 9 of the 14 parishes, led by Hanover, up 34.6%, Trelawney, up 9.7%, and Westmoreland, up 9.4%. Similarly, these increases may be attributed to higher tourism-related activities in these parishes. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for transport, storage, and communication grew by 9%, mainly due to higher levels of activities in both the transport and storage and communication components. The outturn was driven by, 1, an improvement in the air transport component, largely reflecting growth in passenger movement, up 263.9%, due to departures, up 269%, and arrivals, up 256.5%. And 2, increased maritime transport activities, reflecting a 6% increase in cargo handled at the heavier weighted Port of Kingston. Outports declined by 7.2%. And 3, the estimated growth in the communication component was driven by the reopening of businesses, particularly in the tourism sector. Wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim. Real value added for the WR trim industry was estimated to have grown by 3.9% due to increased demand stemming from, 1, increased employment of 93,400 persons, 2, increased net remittance inflows by 7.4% to US $835.4 million, 3, growth in the related manufacture, construction, and agriculture, forestry, and fishing industries, and 4, the relaxation of COVID-19 containment measures. Higher sales were recorded for 6 of the 8 categories in real terms, including other wholesale and retail sale of goods and services in specialized and non-specialized stores, up 9.3%, minerals, fuels, lubricants, and petroleum products, up 16.5%, agriculture, food, beverages, and tobacco, up 8.1%, and hardware, building supplies, electrical goods, and machinery, up 5%. Finance and insurance services. Real value added for the finance and insurance services industry was estimated to have grown by 3%. During the quarter, widespread economic recovery resulted in an increased demand for working capital to upgrade equipment and purchase inventory to satisfy higher demand from customers. Specifically, finance and insurance providers recorded higher net interest income on the stock of loans at deposit-taking institutions, as well as higher fee and commission income. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry was estimated to have grown by 114.7%. Stopover visitor arrivals for the months of July and August 2021 increased by 293.3%. The performance of the industry benefited from increased vaccination in Jamaica's main source markets and initiatives such as the establishment of a resilient corridor and the drive by tourism stakeholders to get their workers vaccinated to prepare for visitors. Cruise passenger arrivals, which resumed visits to the island in August of 2021, totaled 8,379 from 5 ships for the months of August and September, relative to none during the corresponding period of 2020. Visitor expenditure was estimated to have increased by 186.3% to US $463.4 million for the months of July and August 2021. Looking at GDP performance for January to September 2021. For the first 9 months of 2021, real GDP was estimated to have increased by 4%. This reflected higher real value added for both the goods producing industry, up 5.8%, and the services industry, up 3.4%. All industries recorded growth in output, with the exception of the mining and quarrying and electricity and water supply industries. Growth for the 9-month period was led by hotels and restaurants, up 23.7%. Regarding the employment update, our sister agency Statin has already provided an update on the labor force survey. As such, we will not present a detailed report on this area. The highlights, however, are that for the month of July 2021, the unemployment rate was 8.5%, down 4.1 percentage points. Youth unemployment decreased by 6.4 percentage points to 23.9%. The number of persons employed increased by 93,400 persons relative to July 2020. Male employment increased by 55,700 to 677,500 persons, while for females, employment increased by 37,700 persons to 537,500 persons. The age cohorts with the largest increases were age 25 to 34, up 33,900 persons, age 20 to 24, up 17,600 persons, and age 35 to 44, up 16,700 persons. For the short-term economic outlook, October to December 2021, and the calendar and fiscal years 2020-2021. Now looking at the short-term prospect for the Jamaican economy, generally the prospects are positive, given the impact of the easing of the previously implemented COVID-19 containment measures. This has facilitated the resumption of economic activities in most industries. Additionally, the gradual opening up of the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners supported higher levels of external demand, particularly for tourism-related services. Increased employment levels are expected to support greater domestic demand in the medium term. The main downside to this positive outlook is a possibility of a fourth wave of COVID-19 infection, given the relatively low rate of vaccination in the country, as well as a spike in COVID-19 cases in Jamaica's main source markets, which has implications for the reimposition of more restrictive public health and social measures. There is also the potential for a negative effect on economic activities from supply chain disruption. Additionally, the continued closure of the Jamalco refinery will result in continued contractions for the mining and quarrying industry for the short term. Within this context, the economic growth is anticipated for the remainder of this calendar and fiscal year. For October to December 2021, it is projected that the economy will grow within a range of 5% to 8%, resulting in a calendar year growth that is January to December 2021 in the range of 3% to 6%. For fiscal year 2021-22, the projection is for growth within the range of 6% to 9%. So in summary, the Jamaican economy has continued to recover during the review quarter. Most industries have recorded growth, with the exception of mining and quarrying, which was impacted by production downtime as a result of a fire at one of the alumina refineries. The agriculture industry recorded growth despite the impact of tropical storms Elsa and Grace. The economy began the recovery process in the first half of fiscal year 2021-2022, which is the April to September 2021, expanding by an estimated 10.1%, mainly as a result of a relaxation of measures implemented to stem the spread of the virus, as the rate of vaccination increased globally and locally. Additionally, employment has increased by 93,400 persons in July 2021 relative to July 2020. However, both GDP and employment levels are still below their pre-COVID-19 highs. The pace of recovery for each sector has been different, partly reflecting source of demand. For example, during April to September 2021, growth was driven mainly by hotels and restaurants, up some 187.2%, and other services, which includes recreational, cultural, and sporting activities, up 18.5%, that benefited from increased visitor arrivals as a result of relatively high vaccination rates in main source markets, as well as initiatives undertaken locally, including vaccination and the establishment of a resilient corridor to prepare for visitors. Despite these increases, these industries are still below their pre-COVID-19 numbers. Growth in the October to December 2021 quarter is anticipated in the range of 5% to 8%. Early indications are that the recovery has continued as preliminary airport arrivals for October 2021 indicate growth of 141.5%. For the current fiscal year, the projection is for growth in the range of 6% to 8% to 9%. This anticipated performance will be facilitated by the continued relaxation of COVID-19 containment measures, as well as a continuation of the growth momentum observed in industries such as hotels and restaurants, other services, agriculture, and transportation, storage, and communication. GDP levels for the Jamaican economy is anticipated to fully recover in fiscal year 2023-24, while employment should regain its pre-COVID-19 level in fiscal year 2022-23. It should be noted, however, that the longer it takes for the economy to recover, the more likely there will be economic scarring. That is, the permanent closure of businesses, where the most vulnerable will be disproportionately impacted. In closing, the resurgence of COVID-19 and the reimposition of public health and social measures remain the main downside risk to growth. The pace of recovery will depend on Jamaicans observing the protocols and working together to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Let me acknowledge and thank the very hardworking team here at the PIOJ. And thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Director General. We will now invite our guests from the press and anyone else who may have questions to indicate by raising your hand in the meeting room, or you can go ahead and place your question in the chat. Not seeing any responses at this time, and I don't have anyone coming in from any other sources. So I will be asking again. Oh,
there's a chat.
Yes. Okay, I'll go ahead and read the chat. Question for Dr. Henry from JIS. Can we get an update on the progress of Vision 2030 Jamaica project implementation?
All right, thank you very much for the question. An update on Vision 2030. As you recall now, Vision 2030, our long-term development plan for the country, established in 2009, a 21-year plan. We measure implementation and progress through our medium-term frameworks. And so we are now implementing the 2021 to 24 MTF. And so we are in that process of revising in terms of the targets and indicators in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are doing that revision. Some indicators you would recall, we were pre-COVID on the way. We had attained some of our indicators, some of our measures, some of our goals, and we would have been lagging in some areas. So some 66% of our indicators would be on progress or attained, and you had some lagging. We are now revising in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what we find is, preliminary, you'd expect that some of our outturns indicators, maybe in education and some of our maybe social protection. So we're watching to see, we'll be reporting that to the country. And in our next press briefing, there you go, we would be reporting fully. Having completed that exercise, we would be reporting fully on our Vision 2030 program in terms of the targets, indicators. And so we can look out for that in our next press briefing when we report on the December quarter. All right, so thank you for that. Thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. This is from Theo Mitchell. Theo, I'd like to just put in the chat what agency you're from. So the question from Theo is, what are the projections for the construction industry, for 2022, if possible?
All right, so for construction for 2022, you want to give the range, roughly 5%? All right, so that James Stewart, our economic chief, is saying roughly 5% is a projection for the construction industry for 2022. All right, so we'll continue to give reports and updates on those industries as we go forward. But for construction 2022, we're looking at 5%, the projection.
Thank you for that, DG. My apologies for the interruption. Okay, Theo was from JMMB. Because it's a press briefing, we're just going to go straight to Javon Keys from TVJ, who has his hands up. So I'm going to ask that Javon get permission to open his mic and ask his question directly.
Thank you so much, Gwyneth. Good morning, everyone. My question is regarding the unemployment insurance feasibility study. Do you have any update on that, the progress of that? And also an extension to the question that Theo has put, are there plans to maybe consider some pro-natalist approaches? Because I know that we're inching closer towards becoming below our replacement rate as it relates to population. So I would want to hear from you, Dr. Henry, and get your comment on that and what plans there are to maybe consider looking at strategies towards, I don't want to say encouraging population growth, but maybe stabilizing or, so that we don't become below replacement rate and get ourselves in trouble maybe.
All right, thank you for the question, Javon. We lost you for the first part of your question. You dropped out and came back in on the second question. What's your first question?
The first question was regarding the unemployment insurance feasibility study. We wanted to find out if there are any updates on that.
All right, so we can probably update a little more in our subsequent press briefing, but the feasibility study has been ongoing, so we've been making good progress, and we've been reporting to the Minister, Minister Clark, on the same, and of course working closely with the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, Minister Samuda. And so we have a technical oversight committee that is chaired by the PIOJ, but multi-stakeholder comprised in terms of unions, business, and government, public sector. And so very, very good progress being made. And so we'll report a little more on that, but we're getting support from the International Labour Organization, the ILO, in that regard, and some measures, maybe the World Bank also. But so we can say a little more about that, but good progress is being made, and we are pleased with that. In terms of the issue on population growth, you would have heard us report in times past that we like many other countries we are seeing the characteristics of an aging population generally, and so we've spoken in times past of the the demographic dividend and the benefits to the country. You've heard us expound on that a bit. I think we've been sort of looking at programs to be put in place for the elderly, programs in terms of expansion of our social protection programs to protect the most vulnerable. And so as we go forward, I think you'll hear more in terms of the issue of replacement rate and concern. But as it is now, quite a bit is happening around, particularly occasioned by or exacerbated by the global COVID-19 pandemic, that we've been giving great priority to protecting the most vulnerable in the population. So there are a lot of activities going on in terms of policy responses and continued attention and build out in the population space, so we can continue to give updates on that.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Henry, there is a population question here also from Theo Mitchell. The population reached apex in 2018 and is expected to decline over the next 50 years. In light of this, is it prudent to build a new city?
So those discussions I know that have been ongoing, I will allow some of the other authorities in that regard to give other feedback in terms of more responses and the general discourse around that. So a lot of discussion has been taking place, and I think that will continue. But in terms of what you're saying around the population, again, we'll anticipate more discussion on the futures of Jamaica as we forecast the various scenarios and the possible futures of the country as we think of the long-term plan of the country. So you'll be hearing some more there, but I allow those who are leading the discussions on the third city or those kinds of discussions to continue to lead that process. All right, thank you.
And there's a question from Keith Callister. Can you expand on the aluminum and bauxite outlook in more detail in 2021 and 2022? And what factors do you see as critical to its expansion?
So thanks for that, Keith. We recall that we had some factory downtime pre-COVID where we wanted to have renovation and expansion in some of the industry, modernization in some of the industry, an industry that had been over time characterized by increasing times of factory downtime and the need to ramp up capacity utilization because of the age of the equipment there and the need for modernization and expansion. And some of that had been ongoing. And then recently now in September, we had the occasion of the fire at Jamalco. And we've reported now that we anticipate reopening for Jamalco for next year, 2022. So we'd expect that slight drag on the mining and quarrying industry. I think the outlook going forward going through to next year would be negative, James. We expect that to continue as we see activities to facilitate reopening in Jamalco and a continued resumption that we had generally going on for the factory downturn. But let me allow James to say anything else there.
Okay, thank you, DG. Just to point out, to answer your question specifically, for 2021, we're expecting the mining and quarrying industry to contract a little over 20%, between 20 and 25%. For 2022, the contraction will be much smaller, but still within the range of say 5 to 10%. The fortunes of this industry won't reflect a turnaround until the reopening of the closed plants. And at this rate, we are not expecting the plant to reopen before 2022, as pointed out earlier. So growth will resume in this industry, is expected to resume in this industry in 2023.
All right, thanks, James. Let me say for Theo and Javon, the questions on population, just to remind us that the reproductive health survey conducted by Statin is currently underway for 2021. So that will inform, again, a lot of the characteristics to inform policy responses on the Jamaican population. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Dr. Henry, and thanks, Mr. Stewart. I do not see any other questions, so I'm going to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us and participating. Today's presentation will be uploaded to our website and social media pages of the PIOJ and Vision 2030 Jamaica. These are displayed on the screen. Join us again in February 2022 when we will present on the performance of the October to December period. Stay safe and have a good day.